Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's top 25 best episodes of the Star Trek franchise. So in this video, I'm going to count down my top 25 favorite episodes of all of Star Trek. Now this is an episode video that's been requested by many viewers throughout the years, and I never really got around to it, and the main reason is because I've found it kind of tedious to put together, because I have separate lists for like all the individual series, Enterprise, Voyager, Next Generation. So in the past, when I put together one of my favorite episodes of the entire Star Trek franchise, I usually look at my top 10 and just from each series and like try to combine them and arrange them, be like, which episode is this better, which episode is that. And I found that way it was kind of boring. So I thought of an interesting way to actually determine what my favorite episodes are, and that is by doing it through a formula. Now this is something I actually picked up from watching this YouTube channel, The Anti-Trekker, who's done this similar kind of thing a couple of times, where he uses a formula to determine what is his favorite things. So I thought that would be a really interesting exercise to do. So that's what I did. What I did is I came up with a short list of like 100 or so episodes. Yeah, short list, but there's like over 600 Star Trek episodes in the entire franchise. So I made a short list of like my 100 or so favorite episodes from all the series, all 7 of them, although no animated episode was considered because I'm just not a huge fan of the animated. And from that short list, I actually made an even shorter list of like 80 episodes, so I whirled it down to like 80. And so then for those 88 episodes, I applied this formula and to determine which order it goes into the rankings. Now, how the formula works is I'll judge each episode on 6 things, on 6 different aspects. Emotional impact, intellectually stimulating, engagement, believability, technical proficiency, and theme. So I'll give each episode a rating from 1 to 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best, on each of these 6 aspects. And then I average out the score, and then I see how they rank per the score. Now, a lot of episodes tie, so when the tiebreaker comes, I just think, I determine the episodes how I would normally be like, oh, I actually like this episode better than that one. But in order to get their score, I have to use this sort of formula. And it's still very subjective because I'm putting my own personal opinion on how well I think it performed in these 6 aspects. But it's a way for me to, instead of just saying, oh, this episode's good, I have to take different qualities into account. Now, I tried this a couple times, and I had like 10 different factors at first, but then I found that kind of skewed the results because some of the things are too similar. So I wanted to boil episodes down to what I look for the most. So emotional impact is like, it's pretty straightforward. It's like, how did it really impact me emotionally? If the episode's sad, did it make me sad? If the episode's a comedy, did it make me laugh? Like, how much did it impact my emotions? How much was I invested in the characters and the emotional side of the story? Now, intellectually stimulating, of course, is the other side. How thought-provoking was this episode? Did it make me think? Did it make me think a lot? Did it have an interesting, like, sci-fi scenario I hadn't considered before? Was it very thought-provoking? That sort of thing. And 3, engagement. So that's how engaged was I with the episode, like throughout the, let's say, 60-minute or 45-minute run or whatever it is. Like, how, like, in it was I? How invested was I? Was I ever bored at any place? Was I ever slow at any times? And also, if, like, again, if it was supposed to be a comedy, how what I think was really funny. If it was a suspense, was it very suspenseful? Was I caught up in the engagement of what the episode is going to be? And then next qualifier is believability. Now, this has to do I mean, it's Star Trek, so it's not. It doesn't have to be scientifically accurate. There's always a level suspension of disbelief when it comes to Star Trek. So it's not really that, but also, if the science gets too crazy and too unbelievable, then yeah, that will affect the believability score. Also has to do with plot holes. Is there any plot holes? Characters acting out of characters, stuff like that. So does everything sort of match up? Is it believable? And then there's technically proficient. So this has to do with the craft of filmmaking or TV show making in this case, where doing things with acting, cinematography, editing, music, that sort of thing, like the technical part of the presentation of the show, art design, sets, special effects, all that sort of thing. Although I do look mostly at acting in this category, that's the most important for me, but all the other stuff will factor in as well. And the final category is theme. So this has to do, did the episode have a strong theme? Did it have a purpose, a driving, I wouldn't say moral, but a driving theme behind it, something that was driving it. I mean, episodes with strong social commentary will score very high in this category because that's a strong theme, but it doesn't have to have social commentary. The theme could just be a character story, or it could have to do with war or anything, but as long as the theme came across very strong and made a lot of sense, then that's how I judge that. Now, so those are my qualifiers. So now let me get into my countdown. I'm actually going to I'm going to start with my top 50, because I want to mention it. But for my number 50 through my number 26, I'm just going to name the episode and the score, and that's it, because I don't want to be here forever. When I get to my 25, I'll get more into the details of the episode and the individual score for each thing. Cool. So let's start, and this is what it comes down to. So again, it's a bit different using this formula. I don't know if it's better or worse than me just saying, I like this episode better than the other, but I don't know. It's an interesting way to look at it. Anyway, I'll start with my number 50. So these episodes have an average of 8.2 score. So number 50 is Memorial, which is a Voyager episode. Number 49 is Whispers, Deep Space Nine episode. Number 48 is Reunion, Next Generation episode. Number 47 is Timeless, Voyager episode. Number 46 is The Void, a Voyager episode. Number 45 is Improbable Cause, The Dice Cast, a Deep Space Nine episode. 44 is Sacrifice of Angels, a Deep Space Nine episode. So now we get into episodes with a score of 8.3, an average score of 8.3. 43 is Homeward, Next Generation episode. 42 is The Quality of Life, Next Generation episode. 41 is Cogenitor, an Enterprise episode. 40 is Inter Arman Silent Legis, Deep Space Nine episode. 39 is Prime Factors, a Voyager episode. 38 is Survival Instinct, a Voyager episode. 37 is The Defector, a Next Generation episode. 36 is Living Witness, Voyager episode. 35 is Nemesis, the Voyager episode, not the movie. 34 is Life Science, a Voyager episode. 33 is Prey, a Voyager episode. And I'm sorry, excuse me, I'm getting into the 8.5. These episodes have an average score of 8.5 with Life Science, Prey, and also number 32, The Wire, which is a Deep Space Nine episode. Number 31, The Survivors, a Next Generation episode. Number 30, Resistance, a Voyager episode. Number 29, Balance of Terror, original series episode. 28, What You Leave Behind, Deep Space Nine episode. 27, Blink of an Eye, a Voyager episode. And 26 is Far Beyond the Stars, which is a Deep Space Nine episode. So now, I'm going to get into a bit more detail now as I get into my top 25. Also, another thing I wanted to point out, which you might have noticed, is that the original series didn't rank as high. And generally Enterprise, and actually I'll give it away. There is no animated or Discovery. I did consider some Discovery episodes, but they didn't rank high enough to make my top 50. And so most of this countdown consists of Voyager, Deep Space Nine, and Next Generation. I find that those are the shows I like the most, so I generate towards. I know everyone has their personal preferences. There are a few original series and Enterprise episodes on here going forward, but those tend to be the ones that I favor, particularly when using this format, I notice. But anyway, let's get into my top 25 now, starting with my number 25, which is Frame of Mind. So this is the Next Generation episode where Riker goes on the planet and he goes on this mission. He's in this play, but he starts losing his mind. He's in a mental institution and he's on the ship again, blah, blah, blah. Love this episode. So my scoring for this, emotional impact, I gave it an 8. Intellectually stimulating, I gave it a 9 because it's going back and forth. I love the mind-bending thing. Engagement, I gave it a 10 because I was engaged the whole way through. Believability, I give it a 7. Now 7 for believability means it's fine. Like it's not. If it's an 8 or 9, it's like, wow, this is really believable. Everything really, like, it stands out, is really fitting into place. The 7 is, I have no issues, but it's not stand out. Technically proficient, I gave it a 10 just because of the editing mainly and the way the visual effects when Riker goes and shatters in place, and the music combined with that, it was amazing. So I'm giving it a 10 for technically proficient. And theme, I give it a 7 because the theme was good, but it wasn't like stand out it. So that gives it an average of 8.5. So yeah, I love Frame of Mind. Anyway, speaking of Enterprise, we'll get into my number 24, which is The Forge, Awakening Kirshara. So this is a 3-parter. I just included all these 3 episodes because this is a 3-part with the Vulcan 3-parter where there's, I don't want to say civil war on Vulcan, but there's the Vulcan Prime Minister or whatever is very shady. He's involved with the Romulans. He's trying to start a war with the Andorians. Meanwhile, Archer and T'Pol get involved with this group of Vulcans who are trying to unite Vulcan. It's a very interesting episode. Anyway, my scores for this is emotional impact. I gave it a 9. Intellectually stimulating, I gave it a 7. Engagement, I gave it a 10 because I think it was very engaging all the way through. Believability, I give it a 6. It does have a few issues, but it's mostly okay. Technically proficiency, I give it a 9. Pretty standoutish. Nothing that's too standoutish to get a 10, but it was still the music, the editing, and the acting all worked for me. And theme, I give it a 10 because this had strong social commentary about the Iraq War, which I thought was very brave, plus the whole theme of the episode of Archer's struggle really came across, so this was a strong one for theme for me. So that's also an average of 8.5. Get into my number 23, which is Drone, the Voyager episode, where there's the Doctor's nanotechnology, or did 7-9's nanotechnology and the Doctor's mobile emitter like combine in the transporter action, and they create a 29th century drone who's like 7-9 takes on as like a mother figure and sort of mentors him. A very emotional part. Always one of my favorite. In fact, this probably would rank higher for me if I wasn't using this formula. But anyway, my scores for Drone is emotional and impactful. I gave it a 10. Very emotionally impactful. And intellectually stimulating, I gave an 8. Engagement, a 10. Believability, I gave it a 3. So this is what hinders the episode, because the whole premise, as I said, of a drone, a functional Borg, it's basically a humanoid Borg being created from like this transport accident. Very unbelievable. So this is what hurts this episode for me. Technically proficient, I give it a 10 because Jerry Ryan and Robert Picardo are amazing in this episode, and the music combines and the way everything is structured is really great. So it's a 10 for technical proficiency, and for theme also 10, because 7 of 9's character story comes across very strongly from start to finish, of her taking this role of being this mother figure and how it affects her. So that has a final score of 8.5. Number 22 is The Inner Light. Of course, most people should know this episode, Next Generation episode, where Picard gets this probe and latches onto him, and he experiences an entire lifetime within the span of 25 minutes, where he's a family man, and it's about a world. He's on the world that's dying, but it seems the probe sent the planet sent the probe out into space before the planet died. So years later, Picard comes across this and experiences the memories. So emotionally impactful is a 10, of course. It was very emotional. Intellectually stimulating, I give it an 8. Engagement, I give it a 9. There were a few moments of dullness, but mostly I was really engaged with the episode. Believability, again, this is what hurts it. I gave it a 4 because it's very hard to believe that a primitive species that doesn't have space travel is able to create this probe that thousands of years later can like totally take over his Picard's mind and make him live an entire life. I just find that too hard to believe, which is why, and this episode would rank a lot higher, like way top 10 maybe, if it wasn't for this formula. The believability really hurt it. Anyway, technically proficient, a 10, of course, but Patrick Stewart gives an amazing performance, and the music, like the flute music and everything, was amazing. It's definitely a 10 for that. And theme, again, a 10, absolutely amazing. So it's high on everything except for believability, which really hurt it. So it gives us an average of 8.5. So number 21 is Remember. So this is the Voyager episode. Kind of similar, actually, because it's about B'Elanna Torres experiences the memories of the alien, but it deals with the themes of, like, it's a Holocaust analogy that deals with basically a genocide or of an entire, like, race of people. Like, an alien race there was another sub-race in this alien race that were, like, wanted to be primitive, and basically this is a race of germaphobes, so they basically killed them off because they were so afraid of germs, and they covered up, and so B'Elanna experiences this and then, like, telepathic memories. Emotionally impactful, 10, because it was extremely emotionally impactful. Intellectually stimulating, I gave it a 7. Engaging, I gave it an 8 because at times it does dull a bit, but for the most part it's good. Believability, 7. I had no issue with the believability. This is the main reason why it ranks higher than The Inner Light, which I know a lot of people have an issue with, but it did a better job at believability. Technically proficient, 10. It had that one dude, I can't remember his name, the actor who's in the X-Men. He played that governor, senator guy from the X-Men. He was amazing, I guess, star. And even Roxanna Dawson as B'Elanna Torres did probably the best performance of the entire show in this episode. So 10 for that. 10 for theme. They did an amazing job, not just of a Holocaust analogy, but also of how misinformation. I think a lot of this had to do with propaganda as well, and just the whole themes came across really strong. I forgot to mention, Remember was actually an average score of 8.7. Anyway, Behind the Lines is number 20. This is Deep Space Nine during the Dominion takeover arc of the station. Is one of my favorite episodes from that arc. In fact, it is the highest rated one from that arc, because it deals, well, you get a side story of Dax commanding the Defiant and Cisco having to learn to be an Alphys job, and that side story was fine, but the main episode deals with life on the station with the Dominion and the Cardassians in control, and how Odo meets up with the female shapeshifter, and his allegiances start to get confused, and he is linking with her when he's supposed to be doing something important for Kira in their resistance movement. They completely screw it up, and Rom gets arrested as a traitor. It's a really intense episode. So emotionally impactful, I gave it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, I gave it a 7. Engaging, I gave it a 9. I had to drop it a point because of the Cisco side story wasn't that engaging, but the main story was, I would have given it a 10. Believability, 8. completely fits in the canon, and it has a good continuity with the previous episodes, and nothing about it is out of place. So it gives a strong believability. Technically proficient, a 9. Pretty strong performances. Nothing that really stands out, but really the music, the editing, all works. Theme 9 is the theme of being in this occupied and basically being betrayed by the one you love. Worked well. So average score of 8.7. Number 19 is The Raven. So the Raven's Voyager episode, I just reviewed this recently. It was when 7 of 9 first joined Voyager, and her Borg, she's getting all these dreams about the Borg, and she thinks that the Borg are calling her, so she leaves to go rejoin them, but she finds out it's not actually coming from the Borg, it's coming from the ship. She was assimilated as a child, so she relives what it was like as a child to be assimilated by the Borg, and scary. And I thought this episode was done really well. So emotionally impactful, I gave it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, a 7. Engaging, I gave it a 10. Again, I was engaged the whole way through the episode. Believability, I gave it a 6 because it was kind of stretching it with the Federation starship being out in the Delta Quadrant, but not too bad. So a 6 for believability. Technically proficient, a 9. Jerry Ryan and Tim Russ were amazing in this episode. Theme, I give it a 10 because the theme of the character, 7-9's character story and reconnecting with their childhood was very strong. So that's an 8.7 average for that. So number 18 my list is The Visitors. It's a Deep Space Nine episode where Jake Sisko, of course, it starts with him in the future because Benjamin Sisko's father died and his life went to shit, and he was, but he didn't really die. He was just trapped in this temple thingy. So we get a look at an alternate future, which gets undone by the end of the episode. But it's a very strong story about the father and son relationship. So emotionally impactful, gave it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, gave it an 8. Engagement, I gave it a 10. It was engaged throughout. Believability, I give it a 5 because the whole premise of he's trapped in a subspace bubble seemed like technobubble nonsense, but it was there to get the plot going. Technically proficient, I gave it a 9. Tony Todd has older Jake Sisko. It was good, but yeah, that's why I didn't give it a 10, because the rest of the performances in there, top notch, the editing, the music, everything is great. So I gave it a 9. Theme, a 10, because the theme of the love between father and son, very strong, as I said. Number 17 on my list. By the way, that's still an average of 8.7. Anyway, number 7 on my list is 17. Sorry, number 17 on my list is the Drumhead. So Next Generation episode where his admiral comes aboard because the Klingon apparently sabotaged the Enterprise, and so she thinks he's in league with the Romulans, and so she thinks there's a conspiracy, so she's conducting this investigation, which turns out just to be a witch trial, which so Picard wants to put an end to it, and so then she goes head to head with Picard. Amazing Picard speeches in this episode. So emotionally impactful, gave it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, I gave it a 7. Engagement, I gave it an 8 because it can get a bit dull at times, but for the most part it was really engaged. Believability, I gave it an 8. Again, we have a strong ties to continuity with Picard bringing up the Borg and stuff that happened too, so it gets a bit, and there's no plot holes or anything in this, so it gets a bit stronger in believability. Technically proficient, I give it a 9. I want to give it 10 because Patrick Stewart was amazing on this, but the actress who played Admiral Satine she wasn't bad, but she was kind of just okay. So I didn't feel right giving it a 10. But Patrick Stewart and the music and everything else, give it a 9. Theme, of course, give it a 10 because the theme of the social commentary it makes about the whole witch hunts and how that could happen, how people could let fear control them, extremely relevant like decades after this episode aired. So that gives an average score of 8.7. So then we get into my number 16, Tapestry, Next Generation episode, of course, where Picard dies and Q gives him a chance to come back to life if he travels back in time and corrects a mistake from his past, but he finds in doing so it completely changes the person that he was. So it makes him realize that sometimes things that you regret, you think were stupid, will actually help help create the better person that you are, which is really great. So emotionally impactful, I give it a 9. Intellectually stimulating, I give it a 9. Engagement, I give it a 9. Believability, I give it a 7. Technically proficient, I give it an 8. Again, Patrick Stewart and John Delancey, awesome. I wanted to give it a 10, but the actor who played Captain Picard's friend in the past was a very bad actor, so I had to drop it because of that. And the music was great and everything else was great, but so 8 for technically proficient. Theme, again, 10, the theme of regrets and how some things were meant to, maybe things, mistakes you made you a better person. Very strong, of course, so that gives an average score of 8.7. Okay, so we get into my number 15, which is Deadlock. So this is a Voyager episode where Voyager is duplicated, and you have 2 ships trying to coexist on one thing of antimatter, because the antimatter wasn't duplicated, so one ship is destined to be destroyed. So there's one of the versions of Voyager is completely fucked over, so the 2 Janeways meet, which was awesome, and they said, oh, I'm going to destroy my ship. But then the Vidians come and they kill everyone on one of the Voyagers, who was the one that was in better condition, so the one that was fucked actually ends up being the Voyager that makes it out, while the other one self-destructs and kills the Vidian, which is awesome, very awesome. Anyway, I always love this episode. Emotionally impactful, I'll give it an 8, because it was pretty emotionally impactful, but it wasn't the best. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 10, because the whole concept of having 2 Voyagers together was really interesting. Engagement, I gave it a 10. I was engaged throughout, very enthralling. However, believability, I'll give it a 5, because even though the concept of the 2 Voyagers is very intellectually stimulating, it's not very believable. It's kind of hard to, and plus, like when they blew up the Vidian ship, how come Voyager didn't blow up as well? Technically proficient, I give it a 9. I think blanking on her name at the moment, but the actress who played Janeway was amazing. And the 2 Janeways and the visual effects there, and the music was very on point. Theme, I give it a 10, because this theme of having to encounter yourself and deal with yourself. So that gives an average score of 8.7. So getting into my number 14, which is The Offspring. So this Next Generation episode where Data creates a daughter, so another android, basically that he sees as his daughter, so he tries to raise it, and then Starfleet comes and they try to take it away to do experiments on it, or raise it in a different environment, and Picard fights for Data's right to raise his own child, but then the issue becomes moot because the android ends up dying anyway. So emotionally impactful, give it a 10. That ending had me in tears. It's truly emotionally impactful. Intellectually stimulating, I gave it a 7. Engagement, I give it a 10. It was engaged throughout. Believability, I give it a 7. Again, no issues. Technically proficient, I give it a 9. Because, the acting was really good, but not like, there was no like outstanding give it a 10. But everything, acting, music, was on point. Theme, again, I give it a 9 because you had the strong theme of Data and raising a daughter. So that gives an average score of 8.7. So we get into my number 13, which is The Council. This is the Enterprise episode in the 3rd season, right towards the end, where they're trying to stop the Xindi from destroying Earth. So the Archer and Hoshi and his ally from the Xindi, Degra, I think they go into the council, the Xindi council that decides everything. So the Xindi's made up of 5 different races, and so Archer tries to talk him out of attacking Earth, and he seems to have, but the reptilians were actually lying. They wanted to attack Earth, so they end up killing Degra and kidnapping Hoshi. It was very intense, mostly dialogue, but I think it was one, definitely one of my favorites of the Xindi story arc. Emotionally impactful, I give an 8. Intellectually stimulating, I give an 8. Engagement, I give it a 10. I was engaged throughout. Believability, I give it a 9 because of the strong sense of continuity with the Xindi story arc and how it all fits, and everything. The plot behaviors are all built up and everything fits, so all believable. Technically proficient, I give it a 9 because great music, pretty on point acting. Special effects are good. And theme, I'll give it a 9 because it's a strong theme of actually the Star Trek theme of trying to, instead of defeating your enemies in war, trying to make peace and find common ground. It's a pretty strong theme in that episode. So that gets an average score of 8.8. So I get into my number 12, which is Tacking Into the Wind. So this is a Deep Space Nine episode for the ending of the show story arc, which is winding down the Dominion War. So this has Kira, Odo, and Garrick working with a Cardassian resistance group trying to resist the Dominion, and they're trying to steal a Jem'Hadar prototype weapon, or the Breen weapon, so the Starfleet can study it and overcome. But there's a member of this group who's being a dick to Kira the whole time, and so he ends up like in a Mexican standoff with him, which was super intense. And also at the same time, you get another storyline with Worf having to deal with Gowron being corrupt and just squandering the Klingon fleet for his own petty politics, so Worf has to kill Gowron and make Martok the Chancellor, which is really interesting. Also, you get a side plot with Bashir and O'Brien planning to take on Section 31, which is not that interesting, but it wasn't that big of a part of the episode. Anyway, emotional, impactful, give it a 10. That ending was very emotionally impactful, where Kieran was hugging Odo, who was dying. Intellectually stimulating, I give it an 8. Engagement, I give it a 9. Believability, I give it a 7. Technically proficient, I give it a 10. All the performances, the acting, the editing, the visual effects all come together nicely. Theme, I give it a 9, so that has an average score of 8.8. So again, to my number 11 episode, which is Preemptive Strike, a Next Generation episode. Always love this episode, I think more so than most people do, about Ensign Ro, who's now Lieutenant Ro, who goes undercover with the Maquis, and she ends up relating with them and believing in their cause, so she ends up defecting to the Maquis, which is very heartbreaking for Picard. I thought it was a very powerful, heartbreaking way to end Ro Laren's storyline. So emotionally impactful, I'll give it a 10. That really worked. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 7. Engagement, I give it a 9. Believability, I give it an 8. Again, because strong believability ties with the Maquis and Ro Laren storyline. Technically proficient, I give it a 9. Pretty good acting. Theme, I'll give it a 10, because the theme of how crushed Picard was when Ro Laren left really worked. So this gives an average score of 8.8. So then we're in my top 10 now. Top 10 favorite episodes of the Star Trek franchise. We're getting to number 10, which is Jetrel. I was a bit surprised this made it this high as well. This is a Voyager episode. I actually loved this Voyager episode, though. It was about Neelix getting confronted with the man who created the weapon of mass destruction, who that wiped out most of his home world. And so he has to deal with these emotions, and he finds out it's actually he's directing a lot of his inner hate towards this other person who's actually seeking redemption. Very powerful episode. So emotionally impactful, I give it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, I give it a 6. Engagement, I give it a 10. Believability, a 7. Technically proficient, I give it a 10. Amazing performance by the guest actor who played Jetrel and Ethan Phillips as Neelix. And the music, of course, on point. And theme, I give it a 10. Had a very strong theme of dealing with the aftermath of weapons of mass destruction, forgiveness, and Neelix's inner struggle. So that gives an average score of 8.8. So then we get into my number 9, which is The Quickening. Deep Space Nine episode I always love. It's about Bashir going to this world in the Gamma Quadrant that is stricken by this disease that is killing everyone and is seemingly incurable, and Bashir thinks he can cure it, and he finds that he can't, and he has to go through this whole process. But at the very end, he does find a vaccine that cures their children. So it's a very powerful episode. Emotionally impactful, I give it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 7. Engagement, I give it a 9. Believability, give it a 7. Technically proficient, give it a 10. The music, the acting, everything was on point. Theme, I give it a 10, because the whole theme of the character journey that Bashir goes through, that whole thing came across very strongly. Also the themes of people who have given up hope. So that gives an average score of 8.8. Cool, so then we get into my number 8, which is City on the Edge of Forever, the original series episode where Kirk and Spock travel back to the 1930s to try to stop McCoy from changing the timeline, but Kirk falls in love with the woman and finds what he needs to do to save the timeline is to let the woman die. Very powerful scenario. So, emotionally impactful, 10, of course, definitely. Intellectually stimulating, 9. Guardian Forever was pretty interesting. Engagement, I give it a 10. Engaged throughout, very strong story. Believability, give it a 7. Had no strong issues. Technically proficient, give it an 8. It's the original series. I had to judge it for, comparatively speaking, but William Shatner acting wasn't the best. But for what it did, like the design of the Guardian Forever was really interesting. So give it an 8. Theme, give it a 9, because the theme came across really strongly about a loss. However, it doesn't get a 10 because this theme mainly was introduced halfway through the episode. It still came across very strongly. Anyway, average score for City on the Edge of Forever is 8.8. So then we get into my number 7. Best episode of the Star Trek franchise, which is Yesterday's Enterprise. So, of course, Yesterday's Enterprise, the episode where the timeline gets altered, and Picard finds himself in an alternate timeline where they're at war with the Klingons, and Guinan realizes that is the only one who's aware that something's wrong, something's off. So she tells them that they need to send this Enterprise C back to the past to correct the timeline. And then, of course, that subplot of Tasha realizing that in the original timeline she's meant to die, so she wants to go out, makes her death worth meaning. It's emotionally impactful, give it a 9. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 10. Engagement, I'll give it a 10. Believability, give it a 7. Technically proficient, I give it a 9, mainly for the music, which is really good in this episode, special effects. Theme, I'll give it an 8. So very good episode. Yesterday's Enterprise, average score 8.8. So then we'll get into my number 6, which is Scorpion. 2-part Voyager episode where they encounter the Borg, they enter Borg space to find that the Borg is fighting a war, losing war against a species bent on wiping out all life in the galaxy, that they refer to as species 8472. So they have to make an alliance with the Borg in order to prevent this from happening, and the alliance is very tricky at best. Amazing Borg episode, and yes, I do like this one better than Best of Both Worlds. I have said this before, but anyway, emotionally impactful, I give it a 9. Intellectually stimulating, give it an 8. Engagement, I give it a 10. Engaged all the way through. Believability, give it a 7. Technically proficient, I give it a 10. Because the music, the acting was great. It introduced Jerry Ryan. Everything, it's really worked. And theme, I give it a 10 because you had that first officer struggle, and the theme was about how humans are inharmonious, and 7 to 9 came when it was like, oh, you're not harmonious like the Borg is. Very well pulled off. So anyway, average score for Scorpion is a 9. So then we'll get into my number 5, which is Damage, the Enterprise episode, my favorite Enterprise episode, where it deals with the Cindy arc after the Enterprise just got their ass kicked. The ship is in shambles, it's falling apart all around them, but they have to complete this very important mission to save the human race. And they come across this alien race that renders aid to the Enterprise, but they don't give them what they really need, which is like a fuel converter or whatever, because they only have one for themselves. So if they give it to the Enterprise, they'll be stranded. But Archer needs this in order to save the human race, so he attacks the aliens who are only helping them. So he basically becomes the villain, he becomes the enemy in order to save the human race, and this was pulled off so well. Anyway, emotionally impactful, give it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 9. Engagement, I give it a 10. I was engaged throughout. Believability, give it an 8. Very strong, again, continuity with the Cindy story arc. Technically proficient, I give it a 9. Some of the performances were absolutely amazing in this episode. And theme, I'll give it an 8. So that gives it an average score of a 9. So that brings us to our number 4. My number 4 anyway, which is Year of Hell. So this is the Voyager episode when they encountered a temporal ship that keeps changing, wiping out species from existence, which keeps changing the timeline. Voyager gets caught up on this when they get unaffected by this, and so they have to go through a whole year where the ship is falling apart around them. Great character story. Emotionally impactful, I give it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, I give it a 10. The whole temporal causality thing, very interesting. Engagement, I give it a 10. I was engaged all the way through. Believability gets a 6. Because, the believability of him wiping out species willy-nilly, and that they've been doing it for centuries and they're just flying around the ship, a bit hard to believe. Technically proficient, I give it a 10. All the acting was top-notch. The music was great. Everything just came together perfect for the technically proficient. Theme, I'll give it an 8. Strong theme, but not extremely strong. So that gives an average score of a 9. So now let's into my top 3 best episodes of the Star Trek franchise. So we'll get into my number 3, which is In the Pale Moonlight. Of course, this is the Deep Space Nine episode where Sisko works with Garrick to try to trick the Romulans, to deceive the Romulans into joining the Dominion War, because the Federation is losing this war, so they need the Romulans in order to save the Federation. So again, because Sisko wants to save the entire Federation, he's going to use deceiving people, he's letting Garrick kill people, as a very interesting, unique Star Trek episode. So emotionally impactful, give it a 10. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 9. Engagement, and give it a 10. Definitely engaged throughout. Believability, I give it an 8, because again it was very no plot holes, very tight stripped, and very good with continuity. Technically proficient, I'll give it an 8, not a 10. And I know a lot of people may disagree with me and get angry at me, but I didn't like Avery Brooks acting in this. I'm sorry, he did overact. The episode was amazing otherwise. I remember one review I read for a reviewer who said this episode was amazing despite Avery Brooks' attempt to torpedo the episode with his overacting. It wasn't the worst, and everyone else was on point. The music was great, so I'm not giving the bad score for technically proficient, but still I can't give it a 10. I'll give it an 8. Theme, I'll give it a 10, because the whole theme of Sisko being corrupt and the storyline worked very well. So that gets an average score of 9.2. So then we get into my number 2 episode of the Star Trek franchise, and that is All Good Things. All Good Things, of course, is the finale of The Next Generation, where Picard is traveling between 3 different time periods: the past, present, and the future, and it's all this anti-time anomaly is going to wipe out all the life in the entire galaxy, and Q is sort of being his guide through this mission to save the entire universe or the galaxy, whatever. Any emotionally impactful, I'll give this a 9. Intellectually stimulating, give it a 10. Engagement, I give it a 10. Believability, I give it a 7. Technically proficient, I give it a 10, because the music, the editing in particular is awesome. The acting was awesome. Everything was awesome. So definitely technically proficient, 10. Theme, I give it a 10. Had an amazing theme. I actually have a poster. I don't know if you can see it. It has the quote that Q says that the exploration that awaits you is charting the unknown possibilities of existence. It's like the whole theme of Star Trek. So definitely gets a 10 for theme. So that's my number 2 best episode. So that has an average score of 9.3. So finally we get into my number 1 favorite episode of the entire Star Trek franchise, which, if you're familiar with my channel, it shouldn't be a surprise to you. It is Duet, Deep Space Nine episode, where Kira is encountered with a Cardassian she thinks is an evil Hitler-type killer who's killed tons of people, and this worked them to death, tortured them, and she meets him and interrogates him and finds out he's exactly the scum that she thinks who it is, but then eventually discovers that he's just putting on an act because he wants the Cardassian people to, and he's not really this killer, he's just some dude, file clerk, who wants the Cardassian people to own up to what they did because of the guilt that he felt and just being there. And it was very amazing. Really made Kira question her whole perception, her whole prejudices. Very powerful episode. A lot of twists and turns and very suspenseful as well. So I always say my favorite episode. So emotionally impactful definitely gets a 10. Intellectually stimulating gets a 9. Engagement, it gets a 10. Believability gets a 7 because it doesn't stand out in particular, but nothing wrong against it either. Technically proficient, definitely give it a 10 just because of the guest star, the acting. Even I think Nana Visitor as Kira was even amazing. Some people say, oh, her acting was... No, I disagree. I think her acting was the best here that was in the entire show. I think the scenes between them were just electric. Even though there wasn't like any special effects or editing or cinematography or anything like that, you didn't need it because you just relied it on the acting and the music, which really carried the episode. So definitely gets a 10 for that. Theme, of course, gets a 10. Strong themes about the Holocaust and about people's unwillingness to let go of hatred and the need for revenge. Strong theme came across. So that episode gets average score of 9.3. So that is it. That is my top 25, or really my top 50 of favorite Star Trek episodes of the entire franchise, as determined by this formula I came up with, which isn't perfect, I will admit. I tried my best with it, and I tried to give the scores as fair as I could. I tried to be fair to everyone. And so anyway, that is it for that. Thank you guys so much for checking out this video. If you're finding my channel for the first time, I do many more videos on Star Trek. I also cover many other videos on other shows like Game of Thrones, Lost, The Expanse, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.